with demand expected to come back, the question remains, does this mean the economy is back on track?
Companies now, after experimenting with offshore in places like India, Philippines, and Poland, want to bring those jobs back.
We invest in the U.S. We're the biggest exporter in the country. In the cycle we're in right now, we're creating jobs.
From Radio America, it's Neil Asbury's Made in America, the show that explores American industry, large and small, and promotes American-made products everywhere. Put Neil Asbury's Made in America to work for you.
A very big welcome to you today. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Ruffman. Rich, man, we have an incredible show today, absolutely off the charts. We're going to be talking about a lot of really, really important stuff, but the votes are still going on, so we don't really know what the final outcome is going to be. But I was very delighted to see that Senator Tillis has pulled it off in North Carolina. Tight race, considering all the money and everything that was thrown into North Carolina from outside the state. To see him hold on with this incredible victory, very, very good. And, of course, we expected Alaska. So now we have a 50 to 48. We have a 50 to 48 Senate right now. And, so all eyes are on Georgia. Georgia now is at the center of the universe.
Well, yeah. I mean, Georgia, if you think about this, everyone, we know that they're still counting. Of course, one person doesn't really care, and that's, let me think of his name, is Joe Biden. And the mainstream media and everybody else that seems to be supporting him in that. I mean, what a brilliant move. Not to be declared, not to be certified. None of that exists. And what do we find out? That, the Democrats just say, it doesn't make any difference. We're just going to go ahead. We're going to declare him. We're going to put him into the office that Obama created, which doesn't exist, by the way, the office for the president-elect. So it gives them some stature, and everyone goes, oh, my God, of course. And which puts everyone down that road where it'd be very hard to come back and say, oh, by the way, I just want you to know that the president has 311 votes and he doesn't. And we overturn the election. So it's just Georgia is very important, the things that happen there. I'm so glad that we have Tom Price on the show today. This is a wonderful opportunity for us.
Well, you just mentioned it, and so therefore, that's the excitement is now known. We got an incredible guest, Dr. Tom Price, a physician, a congressman from Georgia. Actually, I was just talking to Dr. Price and Senator Johnny Isakson. You remember Johnny, a
Sure.
great guy.
Yeah.
He's been on our show many times. Actually, Dr. Price took over the seat that was vacated by Senator Johnny Isakson, a very important district that includes the north suburbs of Atlanta. And also, Dr. Price was the very first Secretary of Health and Human Services under President Trump. A very important position because obviously, overturning Obamacare, throughout the several years in the House and then the Senate, and then finally after President Trump got elected, and it was partially done, but not totally done. Dr. Price, welcome to Made in America.
Thanks so much, Neil and Rich. Wonderful to be with y'all.
So, you as a physician, and, I remember watching you so closely, during the whole Obamacare thing in the House and, all the votes and everything that took place there. You really led the charge. And, since then, there has been movement on, of course, the mandate, that was overturned. That was done away with. But Obamacare still largely exists. And in this last week, there were very important arguments at the Supreme Court. And the media is kind of jumping on a couple of things that were said during those arguments and thinking that Obamacare is safe and that the court is going to uphold the law. How do you read the tea leaves?
Well, it's tough to read Supreme Court tea leaves. We all back in 2010 and 2012 thought we were going to see things move in a different direction, and of course they didn't. But if I'm reading the tea leaves, what Chief Justice Roberts basically said was that the individual mandate penalty is gone. Congress did away with that penalty, and if they didn't want to do away with the rest of the law, they could have done so at the time, and they didn't, and therefore we probably just ought to stay with ending the individual mandate. That's one sense. Justice Kavanaugh said that from his perspective, it didn't seem like you needed to address anything more than the individual mandate. You and your listeners will recall that Chief Justice Roberts was the final was the tie-breaking vote in the original Obamacare decision, which said because there's a penalty that they interpreted as a tax, then the rest of the law was constitutional. Those of us who fought against that at the time argued that was about as circuitous a logic as you could find. However, that's what the Supreme Court came up with. Now, to have Roberts now say that the rest of the law doesn't require the constitutionality of that taxation authority of Congress is a little disingenuous, I think. But these justices make their minds up in many different ways, and I suspect that what they will do at the end of the day won't be till next June, likely. But I suspect what they will do is say that the individual mandate no longer can apply, but the rest of the law stands.
Well, I would think so too, especially if Biden survives the counts or recounts and the challenges.
That's right.
To me, it seems like a fait accompli that we're going to wind up keeping Obamacare.
You're right, Richard. One of the reasons is, remember, that the states are in the Supreme Court, but the federal government is not contesting that because the Department of Justice isn't contesting it. But under a Biden administration that seems likely to come, I think the Justice Department would actually weigh in on this case, and that would even give more heft, if you will, to the side that believes that the individual mandate can go away, but the rest of the law can stand.
So you've recently published a piece, and Judge Amy Barrett doesn't threaten people with pre-existing health conditions, and that's really the boogeyman in the closet, isn't it? I mean, it's like the Democrats have used that very, very successfully. I must confess that Republicans want to take away pre-existing conditions, and that has been hugely popular. And I know President Trump has gone, many, many times, no, that's not true. It's going to be better. Pre-existing conditions are here to stay. But that message just doesn't seem to resonate. And, of course, now we get a new Supreme Court justice, and she's going to take away everybody's health care. I mean, how is that so flawed? I mean, how did it get to this point?
Well, it got to this point, I believe, because the left has determined that the fear-mongering that they're able to put forward from a messaging standpoint is effective and concerns people. And well, it should if their premise was correct, and that their premise being that pre-existing illnesses, the coverage for pre-existing illnesses could potentially go away, subsidies could potentially go away, having your kids on your insurance could potentially go away, the things that folks tend to like about the law that was passed. But the problem with their logic is that none of that is true, and never was true, frankly. I don't know how many times Republicans have to say that we support the coverage for pre-existing illnesses and injuries in order for it to sink in, but fear drives many, many people from a political standpoint, and that's certainly what was driving folks during not just this campaign, but the 18 campaign and the 16 campaign.
Well, that's very true. It is fear-mongering. I mean, I was astounded when, remember the ads against Paul Ryan when he was running. And they had him, taking grandma and wheeling her over the cliff. I mean, literally. They had an ad with an old lady in a wheelchair, and someone like Paul, boom, there she goes. So, and then also, even and bring it flash forward right now, Senator Dianne Feinstein, with the confirmation for, Amy Coney Barrett, she said health care coverage for millions of Americans is at stake, with pictures of all sorts of people who are older that will lose their health care and lose this and lose that and, wind up sick and dead and dying and also going over the cliff. So it seems like it is the mantra and it is the, status quo for the Democrats to do that.
It is, and it's so very sad because it is all fear-mongering. And it's also, if you look at what truly is threatening the health care for the American people, it's the status quo and the policies of the left. When you have Medicare for all, if we were to have Medicare for all, that would drive prices drastically higher and decrease choices and increase regulation and decrease transparency and decrease the ability to have any sense of patient-centered health care, something that's responsive to patients as opposed to government or insurance companies. And that's the road that we're going down. That includes the public option. When you have a public option, again, you drive prices up for everybody else, you decrease choices, and you increase regulation, which makes health coverage and health care that much more difficult for the American people. So the thing that's actually threatening health coverage and health care for the American people is exactly what the left's pushing. But that's a harder explanation. That's not as easy as just saying Republicans want to take your health care away or health coverage away, again, which isn't true, but that's what the left says, and then you're trying to prove a negative.
So Dr. Price, when Joe Biden says, get ready for Biden care, this is going to be Biden care. So, oh, wow, my goodness, now we got to have Biden care. What is Biden care? And what's he likely to do? And can he get it through the Senate? Assuming, and I'm sure this will be true, that the Republicans have 52 seats.
Well, that's the key. If Republicans hold the Senate, then I think that we can actually try to move forward in a positive bipartisan way to bring about some patient-centered reform. If the Democrats control the Senate, which would happen if we lose these 2 seats in Georgia, then all bets are off on what they would do in terms of government-controlled health care. So these races are absolutely key and pivotal, and I would encourage your listeners to engage as much as possible to make certain that the Republicans control the Senate after January 5th.
Dr. Price, we got to take a quick break. We're with Dr. Price, previous congressman from Georgia, Secretary of Health and Human Services, a really great American, has done so many wonderful things for our country. We got to talk about Georgia. Georgia is so fundamentally important. What is likely to unfold there? Stay with us. Very important that you do.
Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with Dr. Rich Ruff. In fact, we got 2 doctors today. And Dr. Tom Price from Georgia, a congressman from the northern suburbs of Atlanta, previously the Secretary of Health and Human Services, very, very important positions, has done so much wonderful work for our country while he was a member of Congress and the Trump administration. So, Dr. Price, I saw one poll so far. I don't know. The polls are so flawed. I loved James Baker came out. I read a piece this week and said that these polls are undermining our democracy. They are wrong.
Absolutely.
They are, people aren't voting. They are wrong. These people need to be held accountable. But lo and behold, I saw a poll on Georgia, and I had to open it up and see what it said. I don't know. It's the opium. I must be addicted to it. And it was a left-leaning poll. And in this poll, it had Senator Perdue. He was up. He was up by 4 points in this initial poll. And Senator Loeffler she was up by just 1. But again, I think you got to add 3 to both of those numbers to kind of know where we're standing. How are you handicapping this right now?
Well, it's important that people appreciate that Senator Perdue, in terms of the polls, to speak to your point about polls being inaccurate, was up by somewhere between 4 and 6 on Election Day. And he clearly didn't prevail with a majority, and Georgia requires 50% plus 1. And so he's going to a runoff against his opponent. And so I wouldn't put much stock in those polls. What the left is, elections are run by the states, as everybody knows, and what the left has done here in the state of Georgia is perfected the harvesting of absentee ballots. And they've done so in an incredibly effective way to be able to have most individuals on the Republican side. They win the vote on Election Day, they win the early vote, and then the absentee ballots come in, and things get turned around. And that's what you seen with the president here in this state. So it's all hands on deck. This is for the control of the United States Senate. It's for the future of the country, I believe. And so we need to take it as seriously as we can and make certain that everybody is doing all that they can to be absolutely certain that we're going to win these 2 runoff seats come January 5th.
Well, that's correct, and I do find it amazing. I hope, given what's happened in the last few weeks, that the Republicans are out there and actually do something to protect the vote and see what's happening to protect our interests and your interests as well as being a great Georgian. But I want to go back to something for a second. Chuck Schumer was talking about the Georgia vote the other day, and he was saying, if in fact we get the seats, and if, in fact, we control the Senate. I mean, this is how significant this is. And Dr. Price is 100% correct. And that is that if we get those seats, we are basically uncontrolled. We can effectively change this country. Now, those are scary words. Obama said we were going to fundamentally change. He was right. We did fundamentally change this country in many, many ways. I'm not so sure it was good. But in reality, Chuck Schumer sees it that way. And so what worries me, Dr. Price, is that I'm listening to a lot of the very, very wealthy tech guys who are saying, listen, people should move to Georgia. I mean, it's been all over the internet and all over the news. We should move to Georgia. We're going to get places. We're going to move to Georgia, and we're going to register to vote because evidently you have a law or a bill that allows people to move there, and they can register right away to vote. Am I wrong on that?
No, you are absolutely correct, and it's very concerning. And so I was going to mention this or try to mention this, and I'm glad you brought it up, because the left across the country is saying move to Georgia, register to vote. You have to register by 30 days before the election, and you're eligible to vote. And that's you imagine the deceit with which the left is acting right now to encourage folks to do essentially what they never planned to do and never desired to do in order to sway an election in their direction. This is the deceit that the left puts out there, and that's why I'm so concerned about this harvesting of absentee ballots and this strategy that they have that, as you say, is all over the internet to get folks to move to the state and register to vote in the January 5th election.
Well, you're right. I mean, the deceit is outrageous. There was an article out earlier this week in WND that indicated that statistically speaking, mathematically speaking, now being a doctor, you're a scientist, so you deal with numbers and stats and so forth, that said it is, listen to this, to have all those votes come in, like 3 in the morning until early that morning, and then it flipped against Trump. It would be 1 in 53 million ratio, 1 in 53 million, to have that all come in, and nothing for President Trump, all going for Biden. Saddam Hussein didn't even do that well in his vote. No, he didn't. 5% of Saddam Hussein's vote, almost 5%, actually went to people who probably no longer exist, or he made it up, so it would look like he had I'm putting this in italics quotation marks, a fair vote. But not even here. We didn't have that. We had across the board that night 100% all for Biden. It is statistically impossible for that to happen. So I think, Dr. Price, you are so right. We have to watch this like a hawk because, the fate of the country, if in fact we need this firewall, which we do need this firewall, God forbid that, Mr. Trump doesn't get back in, we got to make sure that happens.
Yeah, it's incredibly important, and it is the future of the country, because I think that if we have a majority Senate, then I am confident that you will see some bipartisan activity, but I'm also confident that there will be a block to the kinds of crazy things like District of Columbia becoming a state, like Puerto Rico becoming a state, like packing of the court, all of which can be done with just a simple majority when the Democrats get in charge, and that's very, very troubling.
Well, very, very scary stuff, and at least thank God for Senator Manchin. At least he's come out against some of that stuff, but we can't rely on him. He's still a Democrat.
You can't rely on him. You cannot rely on him. Sorry,
folks. We're really pleased to have. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, you remember, what Joe Manchin said was wonderful. However, it just takes one Republican senator to get sick, to be absent, to do anything, and they control it because they would have the vice president.
100%.
Dr. Tom Price, thanks for being with us. We really, really hope you'll come back as this unfolds. A really wise voice. Dr. Tom Price, former Congressman of Georgia, former Secretary of Health and Human Services. Thank you for being on the show.
Thanks so much. Take care. God bless y'all.
Coming up, we have Alfredo Ortiz, the president of the Job Creators Network. He's going to be with us right now. Stay with us.
Made in America.
Sharply higher at the open, stocks continued to perform well over the course of the day Tuesday.
And I think that bodes well here over the next couple of years for having bigger demands coming to this country.
Now, more of Neil Asbury's Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Ruffman. Rich, Dr. Tom Price, man, what a great guest, to talk about what's happening in the Supreme Court with Obamacare. Kind of looks like, they're going to have the votes to keep it. And then what comes next? Let's see where that unfolds. And then we talked about Biden care. What is Biden care? And is that incremental, or is it something that's going way out there with the public option, Medicare for all? I mean, that's yet to be known. That's why the other topic with Dr. Price about the control of the Senate and how Georgia now is at the center of the universe.
Listen, how could you believe for a second? Now, here Joe Biden said in one of the first debate, well, we only had two debates. In the first of the two debates, with Chris Wallace, Chris asked him at the end of the debate, if the election is held, would you sit back with your people, everyone relax, take a deep breath, and wait for all the votes to get counted? And of course, Joe Biden said, right, of course I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. And then what does he do right away? Within hours, he's like, well, I'm the president. Yeah. I didn't even think people got up yet. They were still saying, no, I'm the president. You got that right away. So how could I believe for a minute that anything he would say that would be moderate is going to be moderate? I can't do that. For my own self, survival, intellectually as well as physically, I can't believe anything the man or any of the Democrats say. Can't do it. That's out the window.
Yeah, very important. Well, Rich, we got another great guest, someone who's actually just recently published a piece together with Dr. Price. We're very pleased to have with us a great friend of the show, Alfredo Ortiz, and he's the president of the Job Creators Network. Alfredo, welcome to Made in America.
Great. Thank you for having me back. Dr. Price is awesome. And, yes, we just wrote a joint piece together on what's happening there in the Supreme Court and Obamacare. So interesting time for sure.
Well, anyway, here we are. We're in the twilight zone. We have to assume for a second that Biden will be the president of the United States. I don't know how Trump overturns that. We can all debate, about, is it fair and, the fraud and the harvesting of ballots. But, that seems to be the way it's going. So let's just assume that for a moment. How do you see, the next 60 days? I mean, what happens with a coronavirus lockdown? I mean, is that really something that we're going to be contending with? I mean, what are you seeing right now? I mean, you are advising a lot of small businesses and entrepreneurs. How are you advising them to get through this next 60 days?
Well, first and foremost, what we're trying to do is continue to put pressure on Congress on passing at least the Paycheck Protection Program extension. Is about $140 billion pre-appropriated. The money's there. It literally is an extension. Both sides agree on it. But damn politics get in the way, of course, and it's hurting all small businesses out there. I'm very concerned if, we do have an uptick and there continues to be lockdowns, especially in Democratic states, we're going to have issues, especially in the winter months. You look at New York City right now. I mean, I see some estimates that 60 to 70% of all eateries in New York City are going to be out of business by the end of the year. And so cash is keen with these small businesses, and anybody who's listening who owns a small business understands this. I mean, cash is just not lying around. And just, you may have some top line revenues, but when you take out all the expenses, right, there's very little left. And in terms of cash, that's pretty much it. A lot of vendors right now, there's no more credit terms. It's COD, cash on delivery. It's going to be a rough time, as we go into the winter. And, especially if it does translate into a president-elect, translates into a President Biden, and he moves forward with these lockdowns, which, by the way, he promised that he wasn't going to lock down the country. He was going to lock down the virus. Well, here we go, 6 days later, talking about locking down the country. And we all know how it is really almost decimated. You saw the drop in GDP in the second quarter is almost 34% drop in the GDP. We've already spent almost $9 trillion trying to support the economy. Another round of, whether it's 30, 60 days of a full lockdown. And we're going to decimate our economy, decimate our small businesses, decimate the employees who work for them, which is about 60 million. I mean, a lockdown is not the answer. We need to continue having, an economy that's open. It's smartly and safely. We have made huge strides from where we were in the spring in terms of therapeutics, in terms of, potentially by the end of November, we're going to start seeing vaccines. We do know, mask wearing seems to help. So let's go ahead and wear a mask. I don't think we need to do the mandates. But again, from a small business perspective, right, these lockdowns will literally obliterate, our estimates are somewhere could be up to 8 million small businesses that go out of business.
Yeah, that's an astounding number. You know what I find amazing, Alfredo, is, Biden's advisor that he has there now, Michael Osterholm, professor of public health and director of the Center of Infectious Disease Research and Policy at the University of Minnesota. That is a long title to have on a card. Just want you to know that. Yeah. It took a lot of breath for me to do that and get it right. But he said back in March, well, the lockdowns isn't the way to go. In the Washington Post of all places, he was saying, no. This is draconian. It's not good. It doesn't work. And if it doesn't work, should we just simply rinse and repeat and keep doing the same thing over and over because it doesn't work? And yet now it's like, well, we probably should have a 3 to 6 week lockdown. So I find that to be an astounding statement from the same guy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And even I guess Biden's already kind of picked his chief of staff. Back in the H1N1 era, he said they made a mistake. They just didn't manage it correctly, and now he's going to be the chief of staff. I mean, I'm very, very concerned. They just don't understand the ramifications. And then when you add all the other elements of what a potential, Biden-elect now, if it does become the Biden presidency, when you combine that with all the other elements of the Green New Deal, the $15 minimum wage, which, by the way, Biden says shouldn't impact small businesses at all. I mean, I'm sitting there going, what? Like, of course it's going to impact small businesses.
He has no idea, Alfredo. He has no idea.
No, none.
He's never run anything. How would he know?
Exactly. Right. Exactly. And so, we're concerned. So we're telling our members and we're pushing hard on, getting to Congress, getting to your representatives. We got to get that Paycheck Protection Program extended and approved. Both sides actually agree on it. Both sides think we should do it. So let's just get it done.
Hey, Alfredo, we got to take a quick break. We're on with Alfredo Ortiz. He's the president of the Job Creators Network. Very, very important work. Still much more to talk about. Stay with us.
Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman. Hey, Rich, we got with us Alfredo Ortiz, the president of the Job Creators Network. Still much, much more to talk about. Alfredo, you just mentioned about the paycheck.
Yeah, I want to go into that too. Paycheck Protection Program.
Right?
Yeah.
Which, by the way, very much benefited our company. And, we employ, here in the United States, we have close to 300 employees. It was very, very helpful. I got to tell you, I don't know what would have happened if it didn't come when it came. And, the middle part of April or so, I mean, I know we were filling out all the paperwork very early April, but the funds came. It came relatively quickly, and it was very, very important. So now we see Nancy Pelosi, feeling her oats, despite, having a shellacking in the House.
Of course, she doesn't see it.
Right. She doesn't
shellacking
see it.
is not part of her deal, unless she's shellacking somebody else.
And you see the lunatic left, the fringe left, also feeling their oats and putting on all the moderate Democrats, if there are such a thing, on notice that they're going to be extinct. The House is moving way far to the left. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that whole thing shakes out. I don't know. I mean, the Democrats got some real issues on their hands right now. But Pelosi is back to her $2.2 trillion of stimulus, and in there is PPP money. What is that likely to look like, the PPP money this time around? Does that mean that people have already received it, will get another tranche? Or is this going to be money that is something else? It's not going to be similar to what it was.
Do we have to go through that whole application process again?
Because I think it was like $300 billion or so of the money, or $400 billion, actually went to the PPP program. So if you're talking $2.2 trillion, do people get to sign up again, or is this a different group of people that's going to get the money?
Yeah, so it's you're going to have to go through the process again, but they're going to try to make it easier for even smaller businesses, right, to get a piece of that. But when you think there's about $140 billion of the bigger previous assistance that wasn't used up, primarily because there was some changing in restrictions that made people a little bit hesitant. So the second round demand wasn't as big. So this is intended to make it easier for a lot of these smaller businesses. They really will be allocating specific dollars for, minority businesses and stuff like that, and excluding probably some of the larger businesses that did take advantage of the previous round that I know where they were in the news and stuff. But, from this perspective, the whole point of this one is pre-allocated, pre-appropriated money. It's sitting there. Literally, it's almost basically an extension of the program. The rules are clearer now and stuff like that. So from that perspective, all that is going to make it easier for people, I think, to access this money, especially the smaller of small businesses.
But people who have accessed it before, or people who have not yet accessed it?
It's going to be both. It's going to be both. It's just, those who are smaller businesses, it's going to be easier for the smaller businesses, whether you've accessed it or not before. If you have access a previous round, you have another opportunity for more funds. If you didn't before, you have another opportunity for these funds. They're just trying to allocate and keep, kind of set aside some for special, like community development, minority businesses and stuff like that.
Another question, and that is the payback on the PPP. Do you think anything will happen with that to mitigate the timing and push that back a little bit more, so the smaller businesses have a shot to keep some of their cash as opposed to writing checks back to the government?
Yeah, that's part of kind of this the new PPP, not only new funds, but in terms of the forgiveness. Part of that's a big deal. Some of it's automatically been forgiven already, some of the smaller loans. And so we really need to kind of keep on pushing all of that process, right? I mean, at the end of the day, there was I call it a glitch, but it was more a technicality, but it is an issue for people who are going to start filing taxes, small businesses. It effectively, because some of the expenses, and not to bore your listeners, but because some of the expenses are going to be excluded as a line item expense that you can put on your tax forms, it effectively makes some of the loans almost taxable income. So we've been fighting that hard. We've had conversations with Secretary Mnuchin. We've had other organizations join those calls, and we're going to keep on fighting that fight. Again, so much obviously has been focused on the presidential race and now the Senate race and stuff like that. But behind the scenes, we continue to push for that and asking our members to also get involved in that push. But this is something that I think ultimately we're going to be able to get at least the PPP elements. It's basically Section 4 of the last round of the Senate piece.
How much money? You said that there was $140 billion left, and I think it started out like in round one it was like 250 or 300, and then they upped it. and then now 140 wasn't claimed. Do you know how much more money they intend to put into that program?
I think it's basically going to stay at that amount. I don't see the amounts going up because they're already pre-appropriated, right? So it's literally extending it. That is almost literally the easiest way to explain this. It's literally an extension of what was already there, so that the banks can start opening up the loan portfolios again and the application processes again, along with the SBA.
Yeah.
Guys, it's basically, I think it's like literally a one-page, extension. I mean, literally, it should be that easy. But again, we've got all the politics, and they want to throw everything else in the kitchen sink to that, $3.2 trillion Christmas tree that Pelosi's looking for.
Yeah. Because you also got the banks and their underwriting involved as well. So each bank also has their own rules on top of the other rules. So it is a bit of a minefield. Hey, Alfredo, thanks for being on the show. We really appreciate you being with us. Alfredo Ortiz, the president of the Job Creators Network. Thanks, Alfredo. We'll be back in touch with you soon.
Sounds great, guys. Have a great one. Bye-bye.
Coming up, Dr. Rothman and I are going to have some final thoughts for the day.
Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman. So, Rich, great to have Alfredo back with us again. I'm very keen to see, the Paycheck Protection Program,
the PPP,
and what they're intending to do with that, because, it did help a lot of people. It did help a lot of people. It kept a lot of people employed.
Oh, there's no question. It was actually there at the time we needed it. It got through pretty quick. And it was very, very effective. I thought it was very effective. Listen, I went through the process, and it was very good for us. We're in a different level than you. You have a much bigger company. And I'm sure it was very helpful for you getting through the crisis and getting us over the crevasses that we had to jump over. But I got to tell you something. I'm very intrigued with the payback scenario, if they can push that back, because I think that's going to help a lot of small businesses not to have to deal with that right now, because particularly if we go through a winter where these crazies on the left, they're going to try and close down and inhibit and scare people, and no one's going to travel, and no one's going to buy, and no one's going to go out, and no one's going to go to concerts, and no one's going to go to the movies. Good Lord, Regal's already out of business. AMC's on the verge, so you got to be careful with that. Then, everyone's going to need, at that level, going to need some help. And I thought it was good. I have to tell you, in retrospect, I was very pleased that Alfredo got into a conversation about that, because I think that's very helpful for the folks out there.
Yeah, and but you got two things going on right now. One, you look at the job situation in the U.S. and it's improving. I mean, it's like vastly improving.
It's doing great right now. I mean, it's absolutely doing great.
There are segments of the economy that, like you just mentioned, that's not. But I think if you look back and say, where we were in April and would have said, this is where we are in November, we would have taken that in a New York second, right? I mean, this is a pretty good rebound. I think this is much greater, and we're in a much better shape as far as getting our economy going, the gross domestic product, and looking at the growth of our economy, looking at where we are with jobs. So you see that on one hand. On the other hand, Rich, is that you see that there is a rebound to coronavirus, right? I mean, let's face it, there are a lot of cases out there. And if we thought there was going to be a second round, it does look like we're in the midst of that right now. So, how do you reconcile those two, as well as being good stewards of the American taxpayers' money?
Well, I think that you reconcile it over the fact that, number one, we know, as we pointed this out with Dr. Price, we know a heck of a lot more now than we did back in March, April, May, in terms of dealing with it. So the therapeutics are radically better than they were then, and we can deal with that, which if we have the therapeutics working, then we have the number of hospitalizations going down. At the same time, we have the morbidity rate going down, so we're going in the right direction. So should we go through this valley of death, so to speak, in this religious way, then at least we have a way to get through it and get out on the other side. We don't have to necessarily die. Don't have to necessarily go to a hospital. Now, you combine that with what Pfizer said the other day with another one of the pharmaceutical houses, that they have their vaccine. Of course, it would have been nice if they said it a week earlier before the election, which I'm sure they knew. They have this vaccine that has a 90% success rate. 90%. It's enormous. That's better than the flu virus, vaccines that we have right now, which are at 50%. So if in fact we can get that out there, now Fauci said, turn around Fauci. That's his name. Turn around Fauci. Don't follow him in the car. You're going to get hit. Said that by the end of the year, they're going to have the vaccines out there. Yeah, I think we can have the vaccines out there. Of course, he didn't say that the week before either. Gosh, I wonder why. But the point of the matter is, Neil, we can deal better with it going forward. So we can somehow, obliterate it in a way and deal with it. 6-7 months ago, we were in this panacea, we were in this panic that we didn't know what to do about it. It's dead. It's killing a lot of people. We have lots of people on ventilators. We don't have enough ventilators. We don't have enough this. We don't have that. Everybody bought out everything in the world, including Chinese, syrups that they need for their. It was amazing. People went through everything, but we're not there anymore. We're just not there anymore. And unless the crazies on the left get us there, I hope they don't. But we're not there anymore. So let's. I think we can take a deep breath and say, if in fact it comes back at the level that people are saying it's going to come back, we have the way to deal with it.
Well, I think it's not if it comes back; it is back, and the numbers are pretty startling if you look at the numbers. But it just doesn't seem as scary. I mean, to me personally, it just. Hey, look, I'm on flights regularly. I mean, I just came from a flight to Philadelphia to South Florida, and the plane was packed. I mean, it was like every seat was full. When I went up to Philadelphia, every seat was packed. And it's not like people are not traveling. I mean, people are out there. And it was very good. It was very well organized. Everyone had their masks on. I think everybody was respectful. People were respectful of, distancing and, working together. I didn't see, a lot of anxiety. I saw people getting on with their normal lives.
Sure.
So that was really, really wonderful to see. But, Rich, unfortunately, we're out of time. Wow, this really flew by. But we'll be back again next week for another adventure of Made in America, where we never stop fighting for your jobs.